in there, while simultaneously, as you said, Salah's been a great player for Liverpool.
Yeah,
it sounds poetic with the injuries and all of those things as a club. It sounds poetic that we've still been there. But then I flip the script, and is it poetic or is it just naivety? Is it naivety or is it negligence, as you said earlier? Like, it is built on a bit of a fallacy. I do agree with kind of the point you said there and kind of alluding to in that questioning the manager is one thing, but based on the lack of acting and kind of the theme of this video so far, we've been questioning, the injuries and things like that. Whatever you say about Mikel Arteta, it comes from a top above. Like you mentioned Marmoush, and I can't remember word for word what Pep Guardiola said, but he said something along the lines of, and whether he's telling the truth or not is another thing, but he said something along the lines of, the sporting director or the chief executive messaged me about Omar Marmoush and said we're going to go and sign him. Normally, when I look at the transfer rhetoric around Arsenal, it's not that a manager shouldn't be. It's like Arteta is suggesting these targets. Now, if we think about it in real terms, the manager's first priority is getting 3 points. How much days, weeks, and time can we spend being in the Prem, being in the Champs, indirectly being told about transfers, being told about Jason Aito, having, I don't know, conversations with KSE? How much time does he have and his team have to specific recruitment? So it's almost like you look at Mikel Arteta, but it's not the single variable. Yeah. It's clearly from above. We have, as we've been speaking about, there is no sporting director. We've missed the last 2 summer transfer windows. As much as, the red cards and the dodgy refereeing decisions and those fine margins, a lot of it has been out of our control. A lot of a consequence of what we're talking about has been in our control. So the things that can be in our control, can we maximize that? Can we fully exert every bit of energy we have? So at least they're not talking points. Then we can have conversations about how unlucky it is. But that's where I can tend to gravitate towards. People can see Arteta makes, arguably in fans' opinions, a lot of mistakes. He also does a lot well. But are we as a club setting up a new manager in the best possible way? He's been managing for like 5-6 years. This club it's almost like we're setting up for him to almost gear up to be an Arsene Wenger kind of figure for our club or a long-term kind of thing. If he's good enough to do that, we'll have to see. You're not setting him up in the best way, because one thing about Wenger, he was experienced in that regards on things just beyond being a manager. Is it too big of a job for Arteta? Have they buried all their eggs rightly or wrongly in Arteta? Because we're back in the Champions League, we're quote unquote competitive. It does make you question, like, do we truly in all facets as a club want to win trophies of that regards? I'm sure we want to, but are we actively going about it in the right way?
Are they implementing the processes to the maximum in any way they want? Like, I've got no the self-sustaining side of things. Like, I've not got too much of an issue with it, because I'm looking at the team top of the table. They employ a self-sustaining model. Liverpool do, and they've been very successful. The only reason they haven't won more trophies because of the juggernaut that is Manchester City.
Unfortunately,
currently, as we know, we're awaiting the outcome of this 1-1-5. So that's the only reason that Liverpool haven't won more in the last 6 years. And also Arsenal's resurgence in the last couple of years as well has obviously had an impact on that too. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about, are we setting this manager up in some ways to fail? Because in my view, my fear isn't that he isn't going to take us far enough. My fear is that we're not going to give him enough of the tools. And as a result, he's going to decide to walk away. And I think we'll be worse off for it. That's why I have the position I have on Arteta, is because I think he is 50% of what gets Arsenal to a title. And the other 50% is what he's given, the tools that he has. And I think he's been given about 35 to 40% of what he needs and what he's been delivered. And we're short of that 15%. And that 15% is enough to be the difference between, in any league, probably first and second, is that 15%. If you haven't got that 15% that your rival does have, and that might be quality, it might be players, it might be luck. Because I think in part, Liverpool's luck this season has been really in. They haven't lost.
Make your own luck. They deserve it in that regard. You're right, man.
Absolutely do deserve it based on the way they've played and who they've beaten, etc.
Ridiculous.
But
it's a shame.
That is the big thing, is that I think it's such a shame that the work that's happened over these last 5 years has not brought about the success in terms of that silverware. Because I absolutely think it's worthy of it. I think it's worthy of winning a league title, to score the goals that we've scored, to win the games that we've won. When we lost to City last season, we'd beaten them at our place and we drew at their place. you know, it's the 2 points that cost us. And this season, I think there's a lot of things obviously out of our control that have really sucked for us. Obviously, there's been things that within our control that we also have not dealt with effectively enough that have also cost us both on and more so for me off the field, particularly in those windows. So this forthcoming summer transfer window for me is where kind of my not connection, but my conclusion will come about this era of Arsenal. Is this summer will confirm to me whether or not the words mean anything that we hear from the top. Because if Arteta is finally delivered in this window where there is freedom to spend, not like there's not a blank check, but there's certainly a lot of freedom to invest. There is certainly need to invest. And there's certainly an opportunity with Liverpool, yes, potentially win the league, but there's going to be some players leaving that club in the summer that are quite big for them. Man City are going to be transitioning. We've already seen, obviously, them bringing a lot of young players. We know that De Bruyne, Kovacic, Gundogan, these players are also going to be moving on. There's going to be transition. Chelsea, we don't know what on earth is going on there.
It's
Man
crazy,
United are a mess. Spurs are still a mess and will always be a mess. But
Amen.
There is still an opportunity there that remains for Arsenal to take advantage of. And this summer, I think, for me, will be the biggest tell. I know some people say, well, Tom, you're naive. You should already know that that's not the case. But I have seen plenty in these last 5 years that have showed me that there is a real desire to win, to compete, to be at the top again, especially from the manager. I just want to know if we're going to be able to do it. That's where
and that's it, Tom, man. That's where when you kind of asked me a similar question earlier, I said, you know what, seeing's believing. Because if I'm completely honest, as a fan in the early days, even when Wenger was here to Emre to Arteta, I think my club did do a lot of speaking and it didn't necessarily correlate on the pitch. But with Mikel Arteta, and to be fair, other sources that were speaking, it was talking and it was correlating on the pitch. So naturally, there's something to believe in. It's one thing talking about you want to improve and do X, Y, Z. It's another thing doing it. So when you're actually doing it, it gives me something to believe in. And then I find myself as a fan, bro, sitting there a lot of the time and thinking in hindsight, you said it there where we finished as 2 points off City last year. Whatever we say about the summer, it weren't the one we shouldn't be inspired by. So it's almost, I don't want to say last chance saloon, because a lot of what I'm saying, I was saying last summer, but it does feel that. And I would say with Mikel Arteta, there is a lot of speech about like the players he wants and he's very niche and things. You could argue up front, that's been the case for a while now. You should know who you want. If you can't get your main target, as a club as well, for matter of fact, whoever is going to be in charge, please make sure we pivot, because market opportunity and things of that ilk cannot come off the bench if we need it, as shown against potentially West Ham. And as much as I'm sympathetic to Mikel Arteta and, how we're being run above him, at the end of the day, if I take your words for gospel, you do say you like the owners. I could be devil's advocate and say you like the job enough. You've signed a new contract, so you're cool to work in these conditions. And admittedly, even with that, Tom, I now, rightly or wrongly, whatever people feel about the ownership, I am now starting to believe, do we just need a manager who can thrive within the context of, as you said, self-sustaining, of not potentially doing what you see other clubs do in another ilk. So yeah, man, the gloves are off. Seeing's believing. As you said, like first week of the window, something needs to happen. And it's a World Cup year as well. Obviously you'd know better than me, but the fans are starting to get goosebumps about the Salibas and Sakas. Will they sign new deals? And if they don't see certain things in the market, I mean, I'll always remember Declan Rice's comments in the January window where he said, I think he just made a joke in jest, but you know what they say, there's always truth in a joke. He was like, the gaffer had to bring on Kieran Tierney, a left winger.
Yeah.
So if they're saying that, if we're saying this, what are they saying in there? And it's one thing me and you going into games and saying this one up front or these injuries, we're optimistic or pessimistic. I know the players have to do a job regardless, but they're not idiots. They're looking at their, competitors. They're looking at what they got in their squad. They're feeling the impact a lot more of Bukayo Saka not being there than us. They train with the guy. It's lonely on the right hand side. So we need to do a lot. We need to do a lot because, like you said, there's something here. I don't like statistics out of context, but the fact that, what is it, 15, 16 games without losing prior to the West Ham game, there's something here. If we just improve, possibilities endless, man.
This is where I'm at with kind of Arteta this season, is that while everyone's using where we are and the falling away in the title race to kind of bash him, I'm looking at the season with the coin flipped the complete other way around, because I'm still I'm shocked that we're second. To be
this
frank,
manner as well.
I'm shocked that Arsenal have maintained. I think since the point that Saka got injured, the gap to Liverpool was they were 6 points ahead with the game in hand, which they drew. So obviously against Everton that was 7. They're currently 11 points clear, but obviously Arsenal have that game in hand. So hypothetically, let's say Arsenal won that, which is no guarantee. That's 8. So with the same amount of games played, let's hypothetically say 1 point. Since Saka got injured, and then Jesus, and then Havertz and Martinelli, we've maintained that gap. I'd like to have seen it closed. And if we'd have beaten West Ham, it would have been closed, obviously. But that was the first game we lost since the start of November. Since Saka's injury, we dropped points in 3 league games. That was Villa, that was obviously the West Ham game, and it was, what was the draw? Brighton, away from home, since Saka's injury in December.
Oh, another one.
So, yeah, and that game, obviously, incredibly frustrating with that Saliba penalty situation. So, yeah, I'm still can't believe that even the title race was being talked about ahead of that West Ham game. You know, if Arsenal had beaten West Ham and Liverpool had lost to Man City, which is always a big hypothetical, ironically, the title was back in Arsenal's hands. It was within their control. If they won the rest of their games, they win the league. So that's how quickly it spun. It spun from one day, one set of results for each team, Arsenal are in control of the league again, to the other way, title's done. It's over. That's the margin, and that's how mad it's been. But Arsenal now going to Nottingham Forest, DG, and if there's one game, you know, that you could avoid, it would be a ground where you've struggled a hell of a lot. I know we won there last season, but it was, you know, nervy. And then I remember at the end of that game, I think it was Taiwo one you scored quite late to put kind of Forest back into things. They have been very good this season. I know they lost 4-3 to Newcastle, but that's ironically, that's still one more goal than Arsenal have managed to score in the last 5 times they've played at St James's Park, believe it or not. So how are you feeling about this one? And what is it you think? Because Arteta has to find something different. So where does that something different come from?
In terms of something different, I don't see him in theory changing formation. I could be wrong. I don't see him changing formation. I don't see us necessarily changing how we kind of build up and all the connotations we've seen us this season. I don't think he's going to do something different. I think if there's going to be anything different, it might be Sterling in for Mikel Moreno. I don't imagine he's going to bet on one of the Haaland youngsters. Although I hope so. Naturally, you never know. It could be some sort of fairy tale and it'd be good for the young man. And I do believe we've had to play every game and still have to play every game in an attacking sense, kind of by ear, sorry, if I'm honest with you, because clearly not one thing is the formula. Moreno, thank you for Leicester. Unfortunately, it didn't work for us against West Ham. So he does have to find something different. What that is, I honestly don't know. I'm a bit nervous about Ethan, if I'm completely honest with you, just because he's played a lot of minutes. And if we haven't got him, it's already an impossible task in a sense for some fans. I don't know what he changes, man. I just think it's Moreno or Sterling, if I'm honest with you, genuinely.
Yeah, I have written a piece that would have gone out by this time. I'd suggested a back 5 for this game.
I'm not against that.
Of White and Tierney in those wide positions, and then Timber, Saliba, Gabriel as the 3, and then playing Rice and Partey, Odegaard, and then Trossard and Waneri as kind of dovetailing players that would drift. I, like you, struggle to see Arteta doing something radically different with the system. I know he talks before. I remember do you remember that press conference where he said, "Did you see that we've had 40 different formations or something?" Mad,
yeah,
a crazy number of formations. And I'm sure he's right. I'm sure if you know,
in a sense, yeah,
bills of different points in the game, the structure would be different. But we all know that in essence, this team is a 4-3-3.
Exactly.
The centre forward is roughly always there. The right wing is roughly always there. The right back is roughly always there. The left back is roughly an inverted player into the midfield. They've all got kind of their rough roles. And those, if you average the position of those players, it would look like a 4-3-3, I think, to the most part. So that makes us predictable. And West Ham, you know, I know that we moaned about our performance, but West Ham were perfect against us.
Yep.
Graham Potter knew exactly what to do and executed it. And when the chance came for them, they scored it. They actually had other chances they should have scored. Bowen had a chance before the one he scored that should have been put away as well. and they executed it perfectly. And obviously got Arsenal down to 10 men, and they were hitting on the counter and hitting on the break, and that's all they needed to do. I remember watching Man United come here and get very, I know when Declan Rice scored at the end of that game, but Man United could have easily won that game playing a very similar style when Ten Hag was manager. And it seems that that's a blueprint, to beat Arsenal. There's this blueprint that teams just need to absorb pressure because Arsenal struggle to score goals. And then when the opportunity to break comes, take your chance. And if you take your chance, you'll probably get a result because Arsenal aren't finding a way to score too many goals. So what is it you think that Arsenal can do to start scoring more goals without having a natural centre forward available?
One, it's going to sound crazy, but I don't know where they're at. But
I'm up for crazy right now.
I think they've got to believe in themselves. Yes, there's limitations with the ability and all of that kind of stuff, and it's not our first choice front three and whatnot. But I think they've got to believe in themselves. Now we know the league is probably gone, but remember why he started to be footballers. Maybe I'm too much of a Wenger baby, but I just think a lot of football is about psychological stuff. You lot are old enough, more experienced enough. You know when to pass. You know when to look over your shoulder. You know when to play like dummies and whatnot and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's a part of that because last season I saw it. Beyond the obvious changes I'm sure Arteta made in Dubai and stuff like that. In fact, the way we played before, I can't remember who we played before the Liverpool game in the FA Cup, but we were poor, if I remember, in that game against Liverpool. Psychologically, we was creating chances. Obviously, like this season, we struggled to put the ball in the back of the net. And then these same players that looked down on their luck and their hands are in their head and all that after one chance or two chance miss, came back from Dubai. You same players, whether I think or you think we need a striker or not, which we do is another thing, but you same players putting the ball in the back of the net. So I'd say that from a tactical sense, it's well known. Mikel Arteta, we've got to learn to move the ball faster. We've got to get Odegaard playing. We've got to collectively move the ball faster. In one breath, I do like the fact that if you can't go down the left, go down the right. Don't necessarily go gun-ho for the sake of it. But it doesn't feel like we have that. And I do think he tries to gamble with like Declan Rice making third man runs. And I do not understand football to the level of Mikel Arteta or Declan Rice. But can we get alternative runners? Can we try different things? Because I did feel against West Ham, it's cash money, really. Back five, as you said, absorb the pressure, hit us on the break, you're going home with 3 points. We've played against sides like that numerous times now. And ironically, we're coached in a mid and low block and all those sort of things. So if anyone should know how to exploit a mid block or do a bit better in that regards, it really should be our manager. And as you said there, it becomes predictable. I do think kind of what we're talking about with transfers, like in an ideal world, if we had Isaac, if we had Nico Williams and all those guys, I think Arteta, it's not arrogance, in my opinion, but he's just willing to die on his sword. This is how I want to play. And in many ways, that's worked. But in many ways, I just feel there's not necessarily a clear plan B to a fan. And I think we don't go up the gears. There's obviously been incidences we moved the ball quickly, but I don't feel that's a consistency of us. Like we're kind of resigned to playing the same way 9 times out of 10, regardless of the minute in the match. Yeah, that's to be patient to work a chance, but you're not going to disrupt the shape of a rigid and compact West Ham unit if you don't move it quickly, if there's not players in the pockets, if we don't kind of what you alluded to with the back three, getting Tierney as a wing back, maybe taking runners with you. Now, Arteta knows football a lot more than me and you. So if we're having these conversations, maybe you're not having it, but you must be speaking about this. And why have we not found the solution? It's a bit tricky because what players have we got? But I do like your thought with, just get Tierney at wing back, bring Benjamin White in the side, just do something unpredictable in that regards. But I don't think we're going to see it as we both see, man.
Because Arteta leans towards control. He leans towards being patient and being in control of situations and systems. 2 things I want to see from Arsenal. I want to see more chaos. I want to see people taking shots. I want to see deflections. I want to see rebounds. I want to see us latching onto these opportunities. And I feel there's moments in games where they get the ball on the edge of the box. And Odegaard's got it on his left foot. And I know he had an awful shot at the weekend, and everyone groaned at that effort. It annoys me that there was a groan, to be honest, in the Emirates.
That's where we're at. Yeah,
I empathise with the groan. I do. But I want them taking those opportunities. I've watched Waneri ping them in the top left-hand corner time after time.
He's one of the youngest.
I want these guys taking risks. I want them taking opportunities because sometimes, yes, they are going to fire one high and wide and it's going to give the opposition a goal kick. But often those goal kicks lead to opposition getting possession. And that's the next point, is I feel we need to be shrewder. We need to be savvier. We need to coax out opposition teams and get turnovers and be better in the transition. We need to be able to nick the ball off them in our own half And you can't do that if you're just suffocating them in their own half where they got 10 men behind the ball. You need to, and when they do have the ball in our half, usually we've only got 4 players back because it's usually a counter-attack against us in those situations. We have had success against a lot of the top 6 sides in recent years under Arteta because those are the teams that have more possession when we play against them. They're the teams that have more of the ball. And we've actually struggled against more of the teams in kind of the middle area of the table because they have less of the ball. They put the emphasis on us and they do a job on us. And they do that job really, really, really well. And we, as you say, have had the most practice of any team against mid and low blocks because that's the way in which teams like to set up against us. We should have been trying something different. And so that's when you look at the things that are within our control, my criticisms of Arteta, that those 2 aspects is that chaos, gambling, risk element has just kind of disappeared in some ways.
Can I ask you a question then?
Yeah, of course. Go for it.
No, just because of that, like, because obviously you mentioned, you know, we like to control teams and things like that. I'm sure you've seen on social media. Do you think Mikel Arteta is scarred by the 2022-23 season in that regards?
Yes, 100%.
Fair enough.
And I think he looked at that. I think we talked about it, and listeners will be put in chat box backing me up as they do, saying we talked about this. There was, I think it might have been one of our listeners actually initially raised the point. I think it was Natish, if I'm remembering that correctly. That's quite impressive. But after the 22-23 season, there was a point made that I wholeheartedly agree, which is that Arteta focused on that 2-point gap to Manchester City, and his thought process was, how do I close that gap? How does that gap get closed so that I don't lose out again? And I think that he incorrectly went down the path of, I need to control the controllables. I need to make it so we are so hard to beat that results like the Villa game that cost us the title never happen again. And unfortunately, I think that has in some ways seen us regress in the way in which we approach games and how threatening we are and how dangerous we can be. And it's made us, yes, continue a very fine record against the better sides in this league. We have not lost a game against a big 6 side in a hell of a long time in the league.
I think like 18 games.
It's nuts, the record we have. But the games that before weren't necessarily costing us are now starting to cost us. And
it's that trade-off.
That's the frustration, is that I think he's focused too much on those Villa games. And, you know, we've gained 4 points on Villa this season. You know, last season, 0 points, 2 games against Villa. This season, 4 points. Should have been 6, but 4 points against Villa this season if we hadn't blown that 2-goal lead. And I think that he'll look at that and go, look, what I've done has succeeded, because in those 2 games that cost us the title against Villa twice, we've managed to pick up 4 points. Problem is the change that you've made has cost us probably more points in those other games. Now, there's definitely, if you go back through the isolation and, you know, that thing about the Fulham game that we dropped points, Martinelli's an inch away from being onside from winning that game. Partey should score from that corner. You look at the Brighton game away from home, that's a penalty that should never be a penalty, and we probably go on to win that game 1-0, despite not playing not playing well at all, really. You look at the Brighton game at home, you know, we were in control of that game at 1-0 with 11 men. Even when we go down to 10 men, I was there. I'm watching it. I'm watching the João Pedro score, and then I'm watching Havertz miss a massive